trusted her like my own daughter until I saw the $53,000 charge on my credit card. I'm Katherine. I'm a retired librarian, a widow, and a grandmother of 2. I wear my hair short and white now, and my reading glasses have become permanent fixtures on my face, not just for books, but to keep a clear eye on the world. Life taught me to read between the lines, in stories and in people, but somehow I missed the biggest betrayal of all. My world used to be filled with the scent of old books, quiet corners, and stories that unfolded gently. I built my life on trust and integrity. I raised my son, Daniel, with those same values. After my husband passed away 10 years ago, it was just Daniel and me. We leaned on each other. We had a rhythm. Dinners together, Sunday walks, birthdays celebrated with just enough cake and far too many candles. Then Amara came into the picture. She was radiant, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. She had this air of confidence, the kind that could either be admired or feared. From the beginning, I could sense she wasn't warm, not in the way Daniel deserved. But I kept my mouth shut. He loved her. That was enough for me. They married quickly, a whirlwind romance that ended with a dazzling wedding. I smiled through it all, wore the pale blue dress Amara chose for me, even though she said it was age-appropriate in a tone that stung. I didn't complain. I was just happy to see Daniel smile. In the first few months, she barely spoke to me. Our conversations were always surface level, polite but cold. If I asked questions, she rolled her eyes. If I offered help, she declined with a tight-lipped smile. But I kept trying. That's what mothers do. That's what women like me were raised to do. I brought over casseroles, bought gifts for the home, picked up the children from school when they were too busy, and I always tried to stay out of the way. I didn't want to be that meddling mother-in-law. But somehow, my presence always felt like an inconvenience to her. She'd sigh when I walked in, whisper in Daniel's ear when I made a suggestion. I could feel myself shrinking in my own family. Still, I stayed silent. For Daniel's sake. For the children. I swallowed my pride and smiled through the stabs. Until last month. That's when everything changed. It was a chilly Monday afternoon. I had just returned from picking up some herbs from the farmer's market. My arthritis had been acting up that week, and I was more tired than usual. I sat down on the porch when Amara suddenly appeared with a cup of tea. Her voice was unusually soft. "Thought you might like this, Katherine. Chamomile. For your joints." I blinked, surprised. She never did things like this. Not for me. I smiled and accepted it, thinking, maybe she's finally trying. Maybe things are turning around. We even chatted for a bit. She asked me about a book I was reading, complimented my earrings. Her tone was sugary, almost too sweet, but I clung to it. I wanted it to be real. That night, after a quiet dinner, I went to grab my wallet from the counter to order some craft supplies for the kids. It wasn't there. I checked my purse, my coat, the bedroom, nothing. I searched everywhere, telling myself not to panic. Maybe I left it in the car or at the grocery store on Sunday. I told Daniel. He shrugged. "You probably just misplaced it again, Mom. You've been forgetful lately." That stung. I nodded, pretending to laugh, but inside something twisted. The next morning, I called the bank to report the missing card. That's when I saw it. A new charge, time-stamped just hours after Amara brought me that tea, $23,000 at an upscale jewelry boutique. Another charge, $30,000 for a luxury travel package, Paris, first class, 5-star hotel. I felt the room spin. I dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat like I was drowning in my own disbelief. No, this couldn't be real. I called the card company, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe someone hacked me. But the representative on the other end said, "Ma'am, the card was used with your PIN and physical swipe. The chip was inserted. It wasn't online fraud." My hands trembled. The tea, the smile, the sudden kindness. I knew. Deep in my gut, in that place mothers always know the truth. I knew who had done it. Amara. I replayed everything from the day before. how she hovered a little too close, how she watched me enter my PIN at the pharmacy the week before, how she suddenly became sweet out of nowhere. I sat there in my room in silence, feeling my world tilt sideways. She had stolen from me, not just money, but trust. The fragile thread that held this delicate family together, and what hurt more, that Daniel didn't notice, or worse, that he did, and said nothing. I stared at the charges on the screen, each number cutting deeper than the last. I had spent my whole life being careful with money, clipping coupons, saving for rainy days, saying no to luxuries. And in a single night, my daughter in. Law had blown through $53,000 of my savings like it was spare change. But this was just the beginning. I had no idea the storm that was about to hit my life. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and a soft light filtered through the lace curtains of my bedroom. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, opened the window to let in the crisp morning air, and decided to check my banking app. I was expecting to see a small charge, maybe the groceries I'd picked up, or a book I'd ordered for the kids. But instead, my breath caught in my throat. $53,000. My fingers trembled as I tapped through the statement. It felt like my eyes were lying to me. A purchase at Maison d'Or, a high-end jewelry store downtown I'd never even stepped foot in. The charge was just over $23,000. Then came the second hit. $30,000 at an international travel agency, first-class tickets, a luxury suite in Paris, limousine service, spa reservations. My jaw clenched. My stomach turned. I blinked. My heart started pounding in my ears. It has to be a scam, I told myself. Someone must have stolen my identity. Some stranger on the internet must have gotten into my account. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Both transactions had been approved using my physical card. Not a duplicate, not online, not stolen data. The card itself. I called the credit card company immediately. I must have sounded frantic because the woman on the line kept saying, "Ma'am, please slow down." But how could I slow down? She pulled up the transactions. "Yes," she said calmly, "both purchases were made with the chip inserted and the PIN entered successfully." My voice cracked. "But how? How would anyone know my PIN?" There was a long pause. "It had to be someone who had access to your physical card and who knew the PIN. Have you lent your card out recently?" "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Never." And then the memory hit me. A few weeks ago at the pharmacy, I was fumbling with my bag. Amara had offered to carry it while I paid. She stood close. Too close. I remember her smirking and saying, "You really should try Apple Pay sometime. Watching you punch in your PIN is like watching someone write checks in 2025. I had laughed, brushed it off. But now, I couldn't laugh. That night came crashing back. The tea she brought, the sudden kindness, her strange warmth, all of it carefully staged. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they weren't just from betrayal. They were from humiliation. I had let her in. I had trusted her. I had convinced myself she was family. I waited until dinner. I needed to see her face. I needed to hear it from her lips. She was there in the living room, reclining like a queen on my couch, legs crossed, nails gleaming, phone in hand. She looked up at me like I was interrupting her peace. "Amara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you use my credit card?" She looked at me with such practiced calm, it made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. She didn't even blink. "Relax, Katherine. It's just a loan. We'll pay it back." Her words were sharp, casual, like $53,000 was pocket change. My knees buckled slightly. I leaned on the doorway for support. "A loan?" I swallowed hard. "Without asking? $53,000 for jewelry, for a Paris vacation?" She rolled her eyes. Actually, he rolled them. "You barely use your money, Katherine. You just let it sit there. You don't even leave the house anymore. Daniel and I needed a break, a real one. I thought you'd understand." "Understand?" I looked over her shoulder. Daniel was standing there, my son, my only child, the boy I raised, the one who used to cry when I left him at school, the one who brought me flowers on my birthday every year. His face was pale. He was staring at the floor, his lips parted like he might say something, but he didn't. He said nothing. Not a word in my defense, not even a whisper of protest. He stood there like a ghost, present, but lifeless. That silence, it broke something in me. I gave everything for you, I said softly, looking at him. I worked extra shifts at the library when your father died. I skipped vacations to pay your college tuition. I packed your lunches until you were 17. And now, my voice cracked, but I pressed on. Now you let her rob me. And you say nothing? Daniel looked away. Amara stood up and put a hand on his arm, as if she was the victim now. Katherine, don't be dramatic, she said sharply. You have savings. You're not poor. This was for the family. You'll be fine. It wasn't your decision to make. The words came out before I could stop them. My hands were trembling. I wasn't sure if it was rage or heartbreak, maybe both. I felt like I was watching the people I loved become strangers in front of me. They had taken my money, yes, but worse, they had taken my dignity, my trust, my place in this home, and in that moment, surrounded by silence, I realized something painful but true. In this house, I was no longer seen, but that would soon change. That night, I cried in my room like a child. Not because of the money. I've lived modestly all my life. I know money comes and goes, but what doesn't come easily? Trust. I cried because I felt erased by the two people I had given my heart to, my son, Daniel, the only family I had left, and the woman he chose to defend over me. There is a pain that goes beyond heartbreak. It's the pain of being made to feel replaceable, and that night, I felt it in my bones. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo of Daniel as a toddler, sitting on my lap in the library where I used to work. Back then, he'd wrap his little fingers around mine, his eyes full of trust. Now, that same boy stood silently while his wife drained my account and threw my love aside like it was clutter in their house. The next morning, I dragged myself into the kitchen, still in my robe, eyes red and swollen from crying. I just wanted to make some tea and clear my head. But instead, I found a note, scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. Mom, maybe it's time you stayed with Aunt Lila for a while, just until things cool off. I stood there frozen. The mug in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. No signature, no apology, no, I love you. Just that. Like I was some inconvenience to be shelved until further notice. I stood outside their home, my home once, suitcase in hand, heart shattered, the wind stinging my cheeks. At 67 years old, I never imagined I'd be kicked out of the house I helped pay for. I stared at the door, half expecting Daniel to come running out and say, I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean it. But the door stayed shut, so I walked away. Aunt Lila, my younger sister, opened her door with warm arms and eyes full of worry. Katherine? She whispered, hugging me tightly. What happened? I didn't say much. I couldn't. I felt like if I opened, Ned my mouth, all the hurt inside me would come flooding out and drown the room. Her guest room was small, barely enough for my suitcase and a single dresser, but it was quiet, safe. Still, I barely slept. Night after night, I lay awake, replaying it all. The betrayal, the cold look on Amara's face, the silence from Daniel, the sound of the tea being placed on my table, a setup disguised as kindness. I imagined Amara parading around in diamond earrings bought with my trust. I pictured her on a yacht in Paris, sipping champagne in designer heels, and Daniel standing beside her, pretending not to know what it cost me. Grief has a way of transforming itself. At first, it hurt like fire. Then it simmered into silence, and then it began to sharpen. I started writing things down, notes, dates, conversations I remembered. I collected every piece of mail, every email from the bank, every receipt. I wasn't a fool. I'd been treated like one, but I wasn't going to stay one. I remembered who I was. I was Katherine, the woman who raised a son on her own, who ran a library while battling arthritis, who taught children how to read and comforted strangers who needed warmth. I wasn't weak. I was wounded. And there's a difference. Lila saw it happening slowly. "You've changed," she said one evening over dinner. "You're quieter, but more focused." I smiled faintly. "I'm remembering who I used to be." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Good, because the Katherine I know doesn't let anyone walk all over her, not even family." I began researching. Financial fraud, identity theft. I started making phone calls, quiet ones, professional ones, and every time I saw that photo of Amara and Daniel posted online, sipping wine on a balcony in Paris, captioned #blessed life, I clenched my jaw and got back to work. They thought they'd silenced me. They thought I'd just disappear into the background like some dusty antique. But what they didn't realize was that the storm they created was waking up something they were never prepared to face. I wasn't going to beg to come back. I wasn't going to cry at their doorstep. I was going to stand up, because when the people you love the most turn their backs on you, you either break or you build. And I was ready to rebuild. But this time, not for them, for me. With Lila's help, I made the call. Reporting your own family to the police isn't something they prepare you for. Not in school, not in motherhood, not even in grief. But there I was, sitting at Lila's kitchen table, phone in hand, heart pounding, hands shaking, telling an officer on the other end of the line, my daughter-in-law stole from me. It took courage, more than I thought I had left. But sometimes, when you've lost everything, the fear that once held you back disappears. And what's left is clarity. The officers were polite, sympathetic even, but I could hear the hesitation in their voices. "It'll be hard to prove," one of them said gently, "especially with family. It's your word against hers unless we have something solid." I nodded, holding back tears. "Then I'll give you something solid." I wasn't backing down. I spent the next few days digging through everything I owned. Boxes of papers, drawers of bank statements, notebooks I hadn't touched in years. I found the original receipts from my credit card, the ones I always kept in a little floral folder in the hallway closet, my just-in-case folder. Turns out just in case had arrived. I went to the pharmacy and asked if they had camera footage from the day I was there with Amara, the day she saw me enter my PIN. They didn't, but they gave me the transaction timestamp. It matched. Then I walked, to the luxury jewelry store downtown Maison d'Or. I wore my neatest blouse, brushed back my white hair, and asked to speak to the manager. He looked skeptical at first, until I handed him a photo of Amara. His eyes widened. "I remember her," he said. "She came in flashing a gold credit card and said she was buying a gift from her, retired mother-in-law. She even showed me an ID. Said you were traveling and she had permission." I blinked. "Did she sign anything?" He nodded. "The purchase receipt. We keep them on file for large transactions." He pulled it from a drawer. I recognized my name, but not my signature. It was a cheap imitation. And they hadn't noticed. I asked for a copy. He agreed. And just like that, I had my first piece of undeniable proof. Then came the real blow. At the bank, I sat down with a fraud officer and handed over every piece of evidence I'd gathered. My original card statement, the jewelry store receipt, and most importantly, documents I didn't even know had been used. Amara, it turns out, had gone one step further. She had accessed my retirement paperwork, forms I kept in the filing cabinet in the hallway of my house. She had photocopied my ID, social security information, and income summaries, and used it to apply for a second credit card in my name. She had forged everything. My signature, my consent, even my mailing address. I sat there in disbelief as the fraud officer laid out the timeline. Amara had used my own identity, not just once, but multiple times, to finance her lifestyle. The jewelry, the plane tickets, a spa membership, even a designer handbag subscription, all in my name, all without my knowledge. And the bank? Once they saw the evidence, they acted. The case was reopened. An investigation launched. Amara's transactions were frozen, the second card revoked. And suddenly, the woman who thought I was too old-fashioned to notice a theft was caught in the web of her own arrogance. You see, they all laughed at my notebooks, my receipts, my habit of printing emails and storing them in folders. Even Daniel once said, "Mom, you're the only person I know who still uses a pen and highlighter to balance a checkbook." But those quiet, observant habits, the ones they mocked, turned out to be my greatest weapons. I had everything documented, every date, every purchase, every bank notification, even screenshots of text messages where Amara casually meant house. And taking a break soon, right before the Paris booking went through. In their eyes, I was just an aging widow with too many cats and too much time. But they underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. The phone rang one evening. I saw Daniel's name on the screen. I stared at it for a long time. This was the boy I sang lullabies to, the boy who used to leave sticky notes in my lunchbox when I worked late shifts. "I love you, Mommy," they used to say. But now? Now he was a man who stood silently while his wife emptied my account, forged my name, and threw me out of my own home. I let the phone ring. I didn't want apologies spoken out of guilt. I didn't want tears if they came only after consequences. I was tired of the silence, and I had learned that silence should not be rewarded. The next day, the police confirmed that charges were being prepared. They had the documentation, the forged signatures, the video footage of Amara at the bank branch using my ID. It was no longer just a family matter, it was criminal, and now the law would do what Daniel wouldn't. Lila made tea and hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. I smiled softly. I forgot how strong I used to be. The truth is, I had been fading, living in the shadows of my own story, quiet, polite, afraid of confrontation. But betrayal has a strange way of waking you up. And once you wake up, you stop letting people steal from you, whether it's your money, your voice, or your worth. 3 weeks later, I stood in court, facing the woman who had smiled in my kitchen, poured me tea with poison intentions, and smiled through the theft of my trust. She wore designer heels and a tailored dress. Her nails were painted cherry red, as if the color could distract from the damage she'd done. Her gaze met mine, defiant, unflinching, arrogant. But this time, I wasn't the one shaking. I stood tall in a modest gray suit, my hair pinned back neatly, glasses perched on my nose. No jewelry, no extravagance, just dignity. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Papers shuffled, lawyers murmured. Amara crossed her legs and tossed her hair like she was still at brunch, not on trial. But the courtroom wasn't a place for charm. It was a place for truth. And for once, the truth was finally on my side. I watched as the bank investigator presented the forged applications, the security footage, the receipts with her handwriting. The manager from Maison d'Or stood up, pointed to Amara, and confirmed everything. She said she had permission, but she brought her mother-in-law's ID. When I asked to speak with the card holder, she laughed and said, "She's old. She doesn't understand credit limits." There were gasps in the courtroom. I remained still. I had no need to shout. The facts were louder than any words she could throw at me now. Amara's lawyer tried everything, called it a misunderstanding, said it was family business, even claimed I'd given verbal permission. But the judge wasn't fooled. He looked Amara dead in the eye and said, "This was not a misunderstanding. This was manipulation, identity theft, and fraud." His gavel fell. Guilty. She was fined heavily, put on probation. The jewelry was ordered returned. The first-class Paris vacation she had bragged about online? Canceled. The second credit card? Destroyed, along with her credit score. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in weeks, I let air fill my lungs without heaviness. The storm was over. Daniel came to see me afterward. He stood on my porch like a boy again, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. No Amara in sight, When I opened the door, he didn't speak right away, just stared at me, tears brimming. "I'm sorry, Mom," he finally said, voice low and hoarse. "I should have protected you." I looked at him for a long, long moment. He looked older now, weighed down, not just by guilt, but by the realization that he had let something sacred die between us. In that moment, I saw two people at once, the little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder and the man who once stood silently while his wife pushed me out. "I forgive you," I said softly, and I meant it. But I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. I added, "But I'm done letting people treat me like I don't matter, even if they're my own flesh and blood." Daniel nodded, slowly, painfully. "I understand." We stood there in silence, the kind that isn't cruel but necessary. I didn't invite him in. Some wounds need more than a court ruling to heal. That evening, I stepped back into my home, alone but whole. The house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because I had. I walked through the living room, touching the back of my favorite armchair. The sunlight came through the windows, touching the edges of the books I had left behind. I lit a candle, lavender my favorite. I made a cup of chamomile tea. This time I brewed it for myself. No poison, no betrayal, just peace. I sat down in my chair, opened a fresh book, and allowed myself the simple, overlooked joy of solitude. The past few weeks had taught me something. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it arrives not with thunder, but with quiet resolution, a gavel, a signature, a closed door that doesn't have to be reopened. Sometimes it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming the space that someone else tried to steal from you. In your home, your heart, your name. I didn't get my years back. I didn't get my son back the way he used to be. But I got myself. And that was more than enough. Since that day, I started doing small things for myself again. Reorganizing my bookshelves, planting lavender outside the kitchen window, walking to the bakery on Sunday mornings just because I like the smell of fresh bread, smiling at the neighbors. I joined a community book club. I even laughed, a real laugh, waity, when one of the ladies said, "Katherine, you've got fire in your eyes." Maybe I do. Maybe I always did. It was just buried under layers of politeness, of fear, of bending so much I forgot how to stand tall. But now, I am standing. And I am finally unafraid. Because some people think strength is shouting, fighting, or being loud. But real strength is choosing dignity over drama, truth over silence, and peace over permission. So here I sit, glasses perched on my nose, book in hand, candle flickering beside me. Not broken, not bitter, just home. Thank you for watching this story. If Katherine's journey moved you, if her strength, her courage, or her quiet dignity inspired something in your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Katherine Stories. Every week, we bring you powerful, real-life tales of resilience, betrayal, and redemption, all told through the eyes of a woman who refuses to be broken. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might just speak to your soul. And remember, no matter your age, your past, or your pain, you still matter. Your voice still matters. Your story is far from over. Until next time, take care of your heart and never stop believing in your worth.